I'd now like to hand over to our final speaker, Rhonda Chapman. Thank you, Rhonda. You're on mute.
Thanks, Vanessa, and thanks, everybody. And hi, everybody out there. This is hopefully a bit of an opportunity to get our head around some slightly different language. And I'll just share a quick couple of slides. There we go. So I'm somebody who has the triple whammy, platinum-resistant, HRD negative, BRCA negative cancer, and diagnosed in September 2020. And I've had 2 lines of chemotherapy as well as been on a trial. I'll just introduce, so I'm just going to quickly run through basically what life is like on a clinical trial. So these are the 5 trials that I have been pre-screened for. You'll see this was the study, the Solace 2 one was the one of Clare's trials with the PARP inhibitor and immunotherapy. The Stafford Fox was a genetic screening trial, and this 3rd one that is in green, which is the one that I'm currently on, is one of the trials that Yolan was just talking about, which is an antibody drug conjugate looking at the anti-folate receptor alpha. There's one that I'm also being pre-screened for, which is another ADC trial, and the one that I didn't make, which was the Cyclin E expression trial that I was rejected for because I'd had too many lines of chemo, of treatment. I think the thing to think about these, as well as about the trials, is what it feels like, and in terms of why would you participate in a trial. This can probably look like I'm a bit of a trial junkie, but I guess the question is, why would you do it? And my question is why you wouldn't. It's good for research, but it's also been really good for me. The trials, you become eligible for a trial at a critical point in your treatment when maybe other options aren't working. And so it becomes an option to consider a possibility that you might be eligible. It is an interesting process, and I'll run through that process in terms of what it feels like to be considered for a trial. But I think the other thing, just for me personally, I'm a scientist by training, although I do have to say learning some of this new language has really tested my my old science muscle that I haven't done for a long time. But I think, you know, I firmly believe in the value of research and science for a broader reason, broader good. And so, you know, I have been known to be a little bit harsh and say that if the trial doesn't work for me, I'm no worse off than I am now, but there's been a great benefit for research and for clinical understanding of ovarian cancer and how to treat it. But I think one of the biggest reasons, and not to, you know, suggest that I'm a martyr to this, is that it really offers me hope when I feel like I'm running out of treatment options, or hope for a different way to survive and to move through the, you know, being diagnosed with advanced cancer that, you know, is now platinum resistant. The other thing to notice is oh, sorry, I think you're seeing my notes as well, is that right?
We can see just on the right-hand side. Yeah, we can, Rhonda.
Oh, sorry about that. I don't know how it's having gone through all of that before. So I think the other thing to notice is that I'm really privileged. You know, like I have, one of the reasons that I'm eligible for these trials is that I have not complicated other health issues. You know, I don't take medication. I don't have other health issues to manage. I don't have young kids at home. I'm self-employed. My lifestyle makes it a little bit easier to live and manage the challenges of being in a trial. So I think I'm just going to try and, we'll just keep moving through. So I think for me, what I wanted to talk about was also maybe the example of actually just being on a trial. So here's my current trial. It's an ADC trial working on the folate receptor alpha, the one that Yolan just described. And we only started this process on the 19th of January. So this is the trial by numbers. You can see it's moved pretty quickly. And since the 19th of January, I've had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17 different appointments as of yesterday. You can see what those appointments are. We start the whole pre-screening, calls, consultations. Do you meet the criteria to be eligible? Then do you satisfy all the medical tests so that you're not excluded, so that you can satisfy the criteria? So things like CT scans and eye tests, as Yolanda described, being a critical factor for ADCs. You finally get a yes, and it starts pretty quickly. You'll notice that we got a yes on the 9th of February, and we started first treatment on the 13th of February. So things move really quickly. Because this is a first in human trial, there's a lot of screening and a lot of testing. So since the 13th, or since this process started, I've donated about 50 vials of blood to science. We've travelled about 1,800 kilometres backwards and forwards between regional Victoria and Melbourne, including some 3 separate train trips for a 20-minute appointment. I have absolutely no idea how much time I've spent doing this, doing the research, trying to get my head around the reading, asking lots of questions, etc., etc. And one of the benefits is that I've had 5 overnight stays with my mother-in-law, who, as of today, turns 99 years and 345 days. And so that's always a lovely benefit to do that. I'm just going to exit this and try and do it properly. I'm sorry about that. Let's share it better. Let's try this again. Is that better?
Yeah, that's perfect, Rhonda.
Sorry about that before. I shared the wrong screen, which we'd been through before. So I'll just quickly go back to that previous one. So that was just the slide in numbers. But I think that the thing to realise is, you know, there's got to be very clear, there's a commitment to contributing, to participating, and not to say I don't resent any of this at all. It's just good to have your head around the reality of what it's going to be like. And the time commitment. I remember one of the doctors at one of the pre-screening meetings asked me, so are you going to move to Melbourne? Because, you know, the amount of time we need to spend there. The other thing to note is that I know there's a big push to get more regional patients onto clinical trials. I am a regional patient, but, you know, I'm a regional patient who, again, is in a relative position of privilege because I'm regional in that I have relatively easy access to Melbourne. It's about an hour and a half, 2 hours into the hospital. For some people, you know, that's not a 5-hour trip. And so I think, you know, there's a whole lot of different factors to weigh up when you're making a kind of commitment to this time. The other thing I think is really important to talk about is the emotional side of being on a clinical trial. And people often talk about the roller coaster. The pre-screening, then all the exclusion tests. You know, we all know what scanxiety is like when you're leading up to having a scan, and that your world can turn on a penny, you know, based on the results of that scan. So, and people often talk about the anxiety, particularly recently where we had a lot of hope, me being considered and suggested for the Cyclone E trial, where I was rejected, and that was quite unexpected. And when you're feeling like that's one of the last options of treatment, it can be a pretty devastating roller coaster that you're on. And then suddenly there's a new trial and things move quickly. So I kind of described it not so much a roller coaster, but there's a whole process of the roller coaster that then shifts into a kind of a more stable routine, still ups and downs. And then the carousel. And I think the roller coaster is really that moment of when you're waiting to find out, are you on it? Have you asked all the right questions? My goodness, that can be hard. And I think Tim and I were reflecting the other night that as I've done more trials, I've got better at asking the questions, really. And do you get access to enough material, you know, of the pre-research to actually know what questions are asked? Can you understand the research even when you read it? I've got a whole folder full of scientific papers that I've would vow and declare I understand maybe 10 to 15% of them. So then you go through that whole decision-making process, and it's what I call the sliding doors moments. You know, they're just single little moments that can be a yes or a no, And that can make the world of difference. And then you're either back on the roller coaster again if you get a no and you have to go through all of that and then figure out what your options are, or you get a yes. You get moved into a treatment routine. You're carefully monitored. Oh my goodness, are you monitored? You're watched like a hawk, which for me, I really appreciate. I used to describe being on my earlier trial as being wrapped up in this gold safety net of care and people really asking lots of interesting questions. Took me a lot to learn of, when they say, tell us any changes, let us know anything that happens. It's like, really, do you really want to know that? And so, working with the trial team and the oncologist to be, what do you want to know? What do you want me to tell you? And that you've got usual up and downs in that process. So then the roller coaster becomes a bit more like a Ferris wheel, steady and routine, but still ups and downs. Once you settle into the trial, you can move on to the carousel. You can have an opportunity and you can settle into a bit of a routine. But because you're so closely monitored, that can flip really quickly back into being on the roller coaster, because you catch issues early and you need to respond, but you are back off the trial often and then back into treatment, which is what happened to me in my first trials. It was a pretty quick decision and a bit unexpected, to be honest. So, and that's the nature of the beast. It's not actually dissimilar to having ovarian cancer, but a little bit more intense, I would say. So then what do you do? Well, I think one of the things I've learned is how to live a good life between treatments. And I don't know, Claire was my oncologist on my first trial, and I think we used to joke about how well I could manage as many holidays and as many great times away as I could in that 4-week or now 3-week window between treatment. It's really easy to be overwhelmed by the medical science of it, by the treatment, by the intensity of it, by all the, the things that you need to do. So I think it takes a deliberate effort to not be consumed by what you're going through and the trial and all the demands of that. It takes conscious decision, and also the health and your fitness and ability, financial ability, a whole lot of different reasons, professional, work life, etc. But I also believe it becomes really important. Otherwise, everything in your life becomes medicalised. And for me personally, I'm not interested in that. So it's about, finding that balance between, look, sometimes it is hard work and sometimes you do need to lie low, but it's also about making sure you get out and do the things. On your screen is everything that I have managed to do in between 3 and 4 week treatment windows. It's possible. It needs support to do that. You need to be flexible. You need to, I think one of the big messages I have is that you've got to ask. The treatment team isn't going to say, so when would you like to go up and hike the Jatbula track in Katherine? If you want to do that and you're not quite sure how to do that and you think it's something that's good for you to be able to have a good life, you need to ask and be propositional about your ideas and about your needs. And my experience is that the medical and the trial team will work very, very hard to help make that happen for you. I know, because being a regional patient, things like having scans and blood tests and scheduling all of those things, Peter Mac and certainly Cabrina try and do that the day of or the day before treatment, so you're not having to make 2 trips and sort of little those things. But I would suggest having that relationship and having those conversations and being your best advocate. My philosophy is that it never hurts to ask. The worst that they can say is no, and have a good reason to do that, and to be really organised and resourceful and willing to be flexible. My attitude is book it. The worst that we have to do is cancel it. And at least if you book it, that you've got that possibility. What I haven't put up on that slide are the trips that we've had to cancel, because that's just too boring to contemplate. And of course, none of this happens without a village of support. I have been, and it makes me a bit teary to think about how incredibly dedicated and caring the medical people are who look after me. You can hear it in my voice. Just absolutely everybody, and just their best interests, who really work hard for you. But also family and friends, both near and far, who hold me in their hearts and stay connected and, do the best that they can to support me through this. And then, of course, there's the people who are there every day. Not only Tim and the rat bad dog Carlotta, but also my crew of Ronnie Rescue Rangers. And the Ronnie Rescue Rangers are a conversation for another day. Thank you. That's me done.
Well, thank you so much, Rhonda, for sharing, your journey, your experience of being on clinical trials. I know everyone on this webinar would be so appreciative just, for being so open and honest and willing to share your story. So a big, big thank you. We have a couple of questions. The first one is, have you regretted signing up to a clinical trial?
No, not once. I'm never sure I've asked all the right questions, but no, not a single one. And I think, and I feel incredibly privileged to be doing one of the hot off the press trials that Yolan was talking about. And so, it's scary, absolutely scary, the risks are there. But I think the important thing to know is that there's a get out of jail clause really easily. You're there as a voluntary participant, and you can leave as soon as it doesn't suit you. And you're not signing anything away. And so you just need to, my whole attitude is to work with the clinical team, the oncologist and the trial coordinators and the nurses as colleagues in a collaborative way, and that you just keep those lines of communication open.
That's wonderful. Thank you. And our last question, I know we've gone a little bit over time, but is there anything that would have made the decision to sign up for a clinical trial any easier?
Oh, yeah. And I may have mentioned this to Claire, but I so have a little bee in my bonnet about the summary page that goes on the top of those bloody 27-page consent forms that, man, oh man. So I know it's hard language to get around. As you've seen, it's complex science. It's really cutting edge. It really, that for me, I get that they're written by the clinical researchers who know what they're trying to test and study and have trial participants for. But I think I'd really like to have a couple of pages on the front of it that are written from the perspective of the trial participant and saying what questions would you be helpful to ask? What's the so what in this for you? Claire's nodding because I've rabbited on about this in the past, but yeah, so I think, I think it's that whole communication about it, because, I have, long dormant, but a science muscle somewhere there in my brain, but I found it really, really hard to kind of navigate and figure out the questions and what I need to know.
We have two more questions and then we'll have to leave it there, just conscious of time. One is, have you experienced any neuropathy? And the other one is, do you know how many clinical trials a patient can go through or is allowed to go through?
Well, look, I'm up to screening for number 5, so I have no idea about that. But, I'll hand that over to Claire and Yolan. I have had neuropathy and from my first round of chemo, and thanks to my support crew, keeping me walking, keeping me moving, keeping me exercise. And I'm just going to put a plug in, Claire, a little bit of cold swimming. I reckon I've managed to make, it's pretty much gone away. I don't think I had a particularly severe case, though.
She really does mean cold water swimming. Very impressive.
Claire, did you want to answer that question just while you're there?
Yeah, so I mean, there is no limit as to the number of trials you can go on, but trials have different sorts of criteria. So there will be some trials where you can only have had a certain number of prior lines of therapy, but while ever you are well, and if your doctor doesn't have the right sort of trials, we actually all ask our colleagues. So if I don't have the right trials, I will ask colleagues at another hospital if they have, and that's what has happened to Rhonda. She has gone from Peter Mac to Cabrini, and by the way, Cabrini take patients who are public patients. They don't make you pay even though it's a private hospital, so it's part of our network. So it really doesn't matter where you are. You can always have that conversation with your doctor and ask to have your case referred in to have it be discussed for other trials. We have, certainly if you're unwell, there may be the time where you are too unwell to go on a clinical trial, and your doctor will know you best. And if you are given that advice, then I guess you could ask for a 1-second opinion. But if 2 oncologists agree, then that's likely the case. And that's about protection. It's about, you've heard trials are a lot of hard work and there are risks and toxicities involved. And those are really the protective features that make your oncologist say, I just really don't think a trial is for you. But up until that point, you can keep looking for a trial that suits you at that point in time. And there's never only one trial. There's just the trial that ends up being right for you at that point in time, and otherwise keep looking.
Fantastic. Thank you. Wow, so much important and valuable information has been shared over the last hour. I want to say a big thank you to our presenters. Just got a couple of slides that I'll share as I do. So big thank you again to Professor Clare Scott, Associate Professor Yolan Andel, and Rhonda Chapman for giving up your time this evening and sharing so much important and valuable information with us. Thank you everyone for being on this webinar. We really hope that you got a lot out of it. The recording of this webinar will be posted on our website in the next couple of weeks. You will also receive an email in the next couple of days with a recording to the webinar and also with an evaluation survey. So if you could just take a moment, it will take a couple of minutes just to complete that survey, because your feedback is very important to us and it does help us to plan future webinars. If you have any other questions that you would like addressed, or you feel that you require extra support, please don't hesitate to contact our information and support line on 1300 660 334. Thanks again, everyone. We hope to see you for our next webinar in a few months' time. Enjoy your evening. Goodbye.